Dead calm. The clumsy, enormous leaves of banana trees rattled in the sea breeze on our hotel balcony. They looked fake. Where are the bananas? Rick asked. Where are my sunglasses? Their margaritas sat in absurdly large salted glasses, sweating on a small plastic table, slowly warming like a shallow pond of scum. He squinted at Lisa. On your head, stupid, Lisa said. It was something old wealthy couples did when things frayed at the edges. They traveled to safe, exotic places. They put themselves out there together against the world as if they were teammates on a reality game show for the despondent and weary, even though some might think they'd already won all the prizes. Lisa wore a new incredibly white blouse, almost see-through. Why wear a sexy blouse if you're going to wear that old lady bra underneath it? Rick wanted to ask, but his baggy old man underwear was pinching his crotch. Do we really have to renew our vows? She asked. Seems like it's been the kiss of death for our friends. Come on, he said, lowering his sunglasses back over his eyes. I'll give you the kiss of death. Try to get into the spirit of it, or we can just fuck the whole thing. That's what I'm asking, she said. Can't we just fuck the whole thing? It wouldn't be the whole thing. We're here, and that's part of the thing. He sighed dramatically in the way that always annoyed her, like he was completely deflating the thin balloon of his patience. You can't get cold feet now. This is just a little foot warmer to remind us of. He paused to try and catch up on his own metaphor. Hot times. Teresa and Rita, James and Teresa, even the Sues. Lisa took a sip, holding the wide goblet with both hands like a hungover priest. They thought the coast was clear. They got smug and careless. Everybody we know renewed their vows, split up. It's like a deathbed conversion. Rick reached over and picked up his own drink and took a long swallow. Eventually, deathbed, death. It's the system. Don't be a Debbie Downer. Lisa picked up her holy vessel and some of it sloshed over the edge onto the concrete balcony. I feel like we're in a situation comedy, she said. A comedy in search of a laugh track. The idea of coming down here was to not have a situation, he said. Our kids still need us, she said. There's that. This is our vacation from them, he said. I'm glad I talked you out of bringing them along. There are two children, Tim and Pam, both gay and currently without partners, are living at home again. He wondered if he and Lisa had stayed together at least partially out of some stubborn need to assert the strength of traditional marriage. He knew it was wrong, but he half believed it on bad days of parenting or of marriage. I thought I talked you out of inviting them, she said. We still need each other, he said. That's the assumption. You still love me, right? He asked a question so slanted that it only had one answer. She didn't bother giving it. He'd wanted them to write their own renewal vows, but she talked them out of that too. That's for kids and old hippies, she'd said. He laughed and agreed finally to keep it simple. Pam and her ex-husband Dave had written their own vows and were married on the beach in Fort Lauderdale, but Lisa suspected she was gay the whole time. Why didn't she put that in her vows? Escape clause. Rick and Lisa paid for the whole thing. It was sweet, then bittersweet. We're not naive that anymore, he agreed. We know the deal. We're survivors. It can be a bunch of fairy tale lies, no matter who writes them. True, many of their friends were divorced now. Some had died, the usual, cancer, heart attack. They'd been to a handful of second and third weddings. What kept them together? Survivor's guilt? She took her bag and held it, her arms rinked between them in the air between lounge chairs covered with soft white pillows. Someone's idea of heaven, sitting on clouds. Should there be more waves out there? Rick fidgeted among the cushions to keep from sinking. It seems too calm. She laughed and swung his arm. Do we look like that Viagra commercial? Nah, that's the other one, Cialis. He himself took nothing. They only had sex once or twice a month. He didn't need a drug for that. She wondered how he'd hold up this week. They had to calibrate their watches to see so that they were both alert enough and interested, not hungry, not having to pee. Jesus, the concierge, had found them a minister who'd do a little ceremony at the end of the week. Apparently, it was a common enough request at Las Olas, resort of last resort, she thought. I still do, she said to herself, either practicing or willing it to be true. He'd gone and written his own vows, squirreling them away in a pocket of his carry-on. He hadn't decided if he'd say them to Lisa or not. Maybe they were more like promises to himself. Maybe he wasn't sure, no matter how good they sounded, whether he'd keep them. What a view, she said with a misty sigh. The sea sparkled in the sun in front of them. The same view the rows of other small faux castle structures had all down the coast, artfully separated from each other by tall hedges or bamboo fences or banana trees. She wasn't even sure what they called this water, a gulf, an ocean, a sea. How could she renew her vows when she didn't know where she was? Artfully separated. She wondered if they truly still needed each other. 40 years. She hated the round numbers with their weight of cement road markers. They could kill you if you suddenly swerved. 37 had been a good number, indivisible. Their son graduated from college, their daughter married, however briefly. Milestones, celebrations, surges of love, days she wanted to photograph everything to save and remember. They finally improved the process of color photography after selling everyone on that idea that color was better, only to see those photos fade into a hazy pink blur, losing definition, while black and white stayed crisp, clear. They kept childhood perfect, sharply defined, the simple clarity and happiness of it. Were there devices, cameras you could talk into, or phones you could take pictures with? Everything digital now, perfect until the power shut down. You could edit out red eyes. What happened after 39? 40. It crushed her a little. Rick was making too much money, turning a sporting goods store into a franchise operation, traveling the country selling gold-plated golf clubs and jock straps. He was counting it too much, stuffing it in his pillow to stain his dreams with bad blood. Constantly on edge, thinking someone was going to steal it out from under him, while being dismissive of her own ambitions as a musician that cost him nothing and gave her a passion. Would she ever be anything besides a piano teacher who sat in at jazz clubs around town now and then? She was tired of the clubs, the late nights. She'd quit drinking, then regretted it and started up again. Maybe she should have let it become more of a problem first. Used to apologize for her abstinence as if it were a social fault. She was tired of smiling at children who did not really want to be learning piano, who looked out the window or at the clock, squirming on the hard bench, waiting to be judged. 40, and they could go anywhere in the world, and here they were on Cozumel, surrounded by other sunburned Americans. You know the difference between buses and flying, he said. She did not acknowledge him. She imagined herself as one of those trendy, lifelike sculptures she'd seen in the Carnegie International last month that he refused to go to, even to make fun of as he once did. When you're ready to go home, you can just hop on the next bus. They run every 20 minutes and there's always seats. Or if there's not, you just stand. You're not going so far you can't stand. When's the last time you took a bus? She asked. She pointed one of the remote controls in his direction. When you fly, you make reservations, you pick your seat, certain day, certain time. You got to arrive hours early just to wait in line. And if you're ready to go home sooner, well, tough luck, sailor. You got to pay all this extra money to change your flight. There's maybe one or two other flights a day, and they're on different airlines, and they're all full. So even if you get an earlier flight, it might not be early enough. It might be so close when you're scheduled to leave that you may as well just wait. Are you ready to go home? She asked. She turned to look at him straight on. Have you looked into it? He picked up his margarita, sipped it, and made a face. They should put sugar around the rim, not salt. Have they ever tried that? They're complimentary, she said. Mine tastes like Fresca with salt around the edge. I wouldn't mind it, going home early. I'd still marry you again. It's just that everything seems so pressurized here. They're not complimentary. It's all inclusive. We paid for it already, all except the tipping. The tipping will break us. He pulled a stiff sheet from the welcome package. The laminated chart recommended how much to give each person on the staff. Do they think we're idiots? He demanded. What pressure? She said. We're looking out at the ocean or the sea or whatever. We don't have to do anything. Except have the time of our lives, he said. We have to do that. Lisa sighed. She wanted to say she'd give him a big tip if he just shut up. She looked at her gold watch and squirmed on a lounge chair, pressing into her back. Maybe we need an interruption, she said. An eruption? He nearly shouted. Interruption, she repeated, louder into the wind. They don't tell you about the wind, he said. We're on an island, she said. Surrounded, he said. I'm going to make my own interruption, she said, and got up to go to the bathroom, the sliding glass door crooked in its track. Rick was reading a paperback mystery he'd picked up at the airport. The detective seemed to have incredible sexual prowess and durability, despite his prodigious drinking. He was supposed to be middle-aged. Every few minutes, a banana leaf blew across his field of vision to startle him. Dusk was slowly fading to darkness, shadows blurring. The sea seemed rougher now, or just louder, since he could barely see it anymore. The huge leaves interrupted the hiss of the waves like the helicopter blades of an invading force. Lisa was watching a Mexican soap opera on TV with the sound off. She didn't know any Spanish besides sí and no didn't count. Dinner didn't start till 8, but they were in for the night. Dinner at 8? He'd be half asleep. Late dinners upset his stomach. They'd had a big lunch in town at a place recommended by Jesus. He'd made a joke about his name. God was not his father's name, he said. He probably said that to all the guests. The restaurant was touristy and overpriced and probably gave Jesus a kickback, but their days of going native were long gone. Just getting out of the resort was enough of an accomplishment, even if it cost them. The banana leaves were spooking him. He wanted to close the sliding glass door, but the air conditioning was too cold. He couldn't figure out a way to turn it down. Did you order room service? Lisa asked. She was nostalgic for her old self. She'd packed some wedding pictures, but they sat in the side pocket of her suitcase. The ears were settling into her ass and thighs, her belly sagging into a subtle roll. Rick kept his shirt on, so he wouldn't get burned, he said, though she was grateful not to have to look at his own loose flab. She bought an old lady bathing suit with a skirt that covered her thighs. She felt slightly ridiculous in it and was glad of the private balcony. They certainly wouldn't be having sex out there, like he joked when they looked at the brochure. The heavy shellfish at lunch had bloated them into a slight stupor. 40 years, he said. 40 years, she said. What's that in dog years? I vow to live forever, he said. With you, he added. Did you order room service? She repeated. I might be getting hungry again. Really? He asked. The thick banana leaves thumped against each other yet again. Have you noticed that? It's driving me crazy, he said. I keep thinking, yes, that someone's out there, she said. They stared out into the night, the sea in the distance, floodlights dimming stars. keeping everyone safe.